Today, we're in one of those interesting Old Testament, especially Leviticus chapters, chapter 17, a chapter that seems very strange, really hard for some of us to connect to life today. And that's understandable. Uh, these are the sections that remind me that the Bible was not written to me. The Bible was written to the original audiences of those 66 books, 39 Old Testament, 27 New Testament. They're not written to me today in Canada, 2021. Leviticus was written to the nation of Israel in the desert with Moses. And so sometimes it requires, in fact, often scripture requires that we do a little bit extra work to understand where or what was being given to those original recipients. Two features and themes of this chapter: a lot of talk about blood. Now, if you remember the Bible Project videos so far, it's understood God was the author of life. Blood represented life, because if you had no blood, you had no life. And so that's the connection there. And then a lot of sacrificing only at the temple or the tabernacle, as the case may be. Why? Now, when it comes to laws and practices like this, and we're going to have a number of other sections in Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy in particular that are going to just seem strange, odd, and by our cultural values today, some of them are just going to feel wrong. Now, we got to remember, this was written to people 3,500 years ago. Different culture, different things. And so what can be helpful for us today is remember two grids, two lenses to look through these kind of chapters through. Both come right from the words of Jesus. Jesus said the entire law and the prophets summed up in two things: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, Deuteronomy 6, and love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19:18. So we can take these passages like Leviticus 17 and go, okay, how could these have been instructing the people of that day to love God and or love their neighbor? Not that they'd be in contrast, but some are very much about God specific and some are very much about interpersonal relationships, and sometimes there's an intermixture right in the command. The other grid, the other lens Jesus gave is, he said, the scriptures are about me. So what did they reveal about God's character, God's person, God's mission, God's nature? So back to specifically Leviticus 17. How do these laws help Israel know how to love God and love others, to use that one? Well, this chapter is about keeping pagan influences out of the worship of and the understanding of Yahweh, of God. For example, pagan cultures surrounding Israel regularly ate blood as part of some of their worship rituals. The idea being that was a way to gain some kind of strength or quality of that animal. And if sacrifices were happening anywhere and everywhere, well, then they could be easily happening separate from those people who were tasked with helping Israel remember who God was, what God was like, what God was calling them to be, and that strength and quality of the animals, like maybe like strength from a bull or something like that. No, it's Yahweh was the source, not the animals. See, as we're going to see later as we get into Numbers, or especially the book of Judges, it never goes well for the people of God when they start to do things, well, what's right in their own eyes, to use the phrase from Judges. And so what can be an application from Leviticus 17 for us today? So I'm going to kind of go more on, well, an application maybe from that sacrificing only at the temple. I think a parallel to that can be for us today is that as Canadian Christians in 2021, we live in a very individualistic culture. And what the scriptures show is that seeking to follow God individually by ourselves, without being richly connected to others, is actually a recipe for disaster. We need to follow God. We need to be learning about God in community. And so, for example, I'm not the first person to say this. I think one of the errors, and speaking our context here, our evangelical church culture in North America, we also have an error of a celebrity culture, which we've adopted that or been influenced by that by our broader society. And I mean, if you have a big online following, if you've got a big church, if you've written a lot of books, if you have a big radio ministry that you cover, all sorts of different stations, and um, you know, we in the church in North America have this perception that if you have a big following, then what you say must be true or valid. Um, those are the people to listen to. Those are the people to learn from. And I'm not meaning to dismiss that entirely. However, the size of a person's following has never been in Scripture to be the measure of whether someone is saying or teaching truth. It's character. And that's one thing that when you read someone's book or you listen to their podcast or you listen to their sermons online, or even if you're in a big church, you don't have a connection with the person you're learning from. As we're seeing, some of the big leaders in our evangelical churches have shown some deep character flaws. It's harmed their ministry. It's brought disrepute to God. And I'm not meaning to slam them or kind of cast them aside, because it could have been me. I don't know. We all have our issues. But what I'm saying from a learning standpoint is, if we're not in a position to know or have a sense of the character of the people that we are receiving from, that's not healthy. As we're learning, as we're growing, as we're engaging in those books or podcasts or things, are there people who we know, who we can be talking to about what we're reading, what we're learning, what we're excited about? Do you have a connection with the people that you're learning from? And if you don't, what are the connections you're building with those that you can be in community and you can discern those ideas and things and practices or lessons or what have you together? Who are you learning with? Not just hearing from, but talking with, interacting with. I think that's part of a modern application of the ancient command to sacrifice only at the tabernacle. Food for thought, I hope. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you today, and would you know his peace. God bless.